That right there is Joshua Hale, 2009, fresh from Burning Man. Good times. Don't remember much. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me today live. I've been looking forward to this presentation all week. We're coming to a part where the holistic self-assessment. You guys have been reading about this in the guidebook. It is a framework for breaking free from borrowed beliefs and building authentic principles that you can actually defend. It guides you through identifying your true values, recognizing where your daily life contradicts what you claim to believe. There was a lot to cover this week, and I hope you guys were able to make through most of it. And the holistic self-assessment is what we're able to do to make a decision of who we are and what we stand for. And then part 4 and part 5 were about creating the new you, the you 2.0, where you pick who you want to be and the direction you want to head to. And we're then able to use both of these to inform our decision making, the relationships in our lives, and the goals from all the chaotic reaction out in society, in our lives, to give us real clear choices guided by a self-built operating system that reflects who you are genuinely and who you want to become. I didn't have this stuff when you saw this guy with the spikes. I was just floating around aimlessly, pretty much seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain. That's basically what I was operating with. So let me ask you something. Who are you, really? Who are you when nobody's watching? I'm serious. Not who you tell people you are, not the LinkedIn version, not the family dinner version. Who are you actually? Most of us are walking around like NPCs in someone else's video game. They just follow the pre-installed value system that they never chose and run on autopilot with borrowed beliefs. And here's the brutal part. There are 2 versions of you walking around right now. You got your private self, the one who shows up at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, your real thoughts, your real fears. There's nothing there to distract you. The person you see in the mirror when you've totally, by yourself. Who you'd be if you had a whole day to yourself, no TVs, no distractions, just sitting with who you are. Then there's the public self, the performance, the character you play at work, on social media, hanging out with certain friends, the version of you think you're supposed to be. And the gap between these two, that's where all the stress and friction in your life is. It's where the I'm a fraud feeling comes from. I know this because I was trapped in this split for years, and it almost destroyed me. So picture this, 16 years old, standing at the biggest crossroads of my young life. You guys know I grew up in a restrictive religious household. Everything was predetermined. What to believe, how to act, who to be. My entire value system was handed to me like a script that I didn't write. So at 16, I made a choice. I walked away from all that. I left the religion, left my parents' house, exiled from everything that I knew. But here's where I messed up. I threw out all those inherited values and I didn't replace them with anything. So for my entire 20s, I was running on autopilot with literally one guiding principle. Try not to be a jerk. That was it. That was my entire moral compass. Try not to steal. Try not to harm people. Try not to be an asshole. And because it feels good is your only compass, you're going to get lost fast. Drug habits settled in, started hanging out with sketchy people who didn't have good values or principles either. And it's easy when someone says, big deal, man, just take it. Or screw it, man, you'll never see him again. it quickly pulls you down into a dark side of society. So let me paint a picture of what rock bottom looks like. I remember eating a cup of noodles because I couldn't afford any other food. My paycheck was still probably like 3 or 4 days away. I didn't have any money for cigarettes, so I was pulling butts out of ashtrays. My friends weren't returning my phone calls because I'd been drinking hard liquor the night before. And I woke up in someone else's bed and I had to walk home, too ashamed to talk about what I did the night before with anybody. And I couldn't even answer this basic question: who am I? I didn't know. Where do you want to be in 5 years? I didn't know. I was just floating around like I was chasing a red balloon. I had nothing, no frameworks, no foundation, just a vague feeling of wanting to feel good and to have a good time. Now, fast forward to today, I'm living on 10 gorgeous acres out here with my wife, her parents, her sister. My 7-year-old daughter is growing up in this paradise. It blows my mind. And my business, my life first business architecture coaching is crushing it. Like, I'm really starting to connect with people and helping them build their businesses to support their lifestyles. And right after this call, I got to run off to our mutual aid admin meeting because it's that time of month again. We meet once a month, and I'm excited to get back to that group and to plan our next steps. What we're going to be doing. We got, I think, next weekend we're going to be harvesting chickens. That's going to be a full day, so we got to do some planning for that. And I got some of our best friends moved up the street, and it's people that I could trust our kid to be dropped off with, which kind of before then was kind of mind blowing. We really wouldn't trust anybody with, hanging out with our kids. This transformation, it didn't just happen by accident. It didn't just happen by manifesting or like wishing really hard. It happened because I built a foundation. So, growing up religious, I was handed a complete value system. Be honest, because God's watching. Don't steal, because of the commandments. Respect authority, because the Bible says so. And don't question the rules, because that's private. The problem, none of these were my beliefs. They were borrowed. They were inherited, like living in a house full of furniture you didn't choose. It's there, but it doesn't fit your life. So when I left that world at 16, I threw it all out, but I didn't replace it with anything. I spent years living in an empty room, making decisions based upon whatever felt good in the moment, no matter where I ended up in this drug fog. You can't build a meaningful life on borrowed beliefs, and you definitely can't build it on feelings alone. Feelings change. What felt good at 2 a.m. on a Friday night didn't feel so good noon on Monday when I was dealing with the hangover consequences. This is Derek Bros. I came across him. He's an activist for the Freedom Cell Network. Definitely worth checking that out. He actually was going around the United States on tour, and he was meeting people at a park to volunteer and clean up the park. And then afterwards, we'd do a workshop, and he'd share about his travels. So I was really impressed with what he was accomplishing, what he stood for, and then he was actually like out there doing it, not just posting about it. And he came up with the book Holistic Self-Assessment that you guys saw in the resources. He also ran for mayor of Houston, and in there he exposed corruption on the local electoral system. Pretty fascinating stuff to see an outsider who's had different views be blocked from even entering into the mayor electoral race. So, and what most impressed me with Derek was that he had a rough past too. He went to prison for decisions he made on meth, and he was addicted to drugs, the whole deal. And like me, he had to rebuild himself from the ground up because the direction that he was heading was same as mine, like a short lifespan. And so he wrote the book Holistic Self Assessment, based on his own experiences. And that's when I dove into it. I think this was probably 2015. And right off the bat is asking, who am I? What do I believe? But he didn't just say in his book, figure it out. He gave everybody a step-by-step process. And first step was getting real about who you actually are, not who you're performing as. Choosing your principles you can defend, not just ones you inherited. Setting goals that matter. Find where your life doesn't match your stated values, and then fix that gap. Sounds simple, right? But when you're coming out of years of chaos with no framework, having someone say, hey, start here, then go here, then go here, it helps immensely. It's everything, because I had no map. Otherwise, you just don't know what you don't know. So let me tell you about the moment I realized I had no idea what I actually believed. I was about a year clean, talking to a friend in my 30s, right? Simple question, so what do you believe in? What's your core principles? Well, just like, don't be a jerk, treat people nice. Okay, but why? Why is honesty and kindness more important to you? Well, you're supposed to be kind. Says who? I had nothing to say to that. My entire moral framework was built on because somebody told me. And well, it just feels right. And here's the thing. When your beliefs are that shallow, they fold the second things get hard. Can't pay rent? Well, maybe stealing isn't that bad. Friends ask you to lie for them? Honesty is important, but so is loyalty, right? Somebody cuts you off in traffic, treat people right? Not today. Without a solid why behind your principles, they're just suggestions you'll follow when it's convenient. When your private self meets the public self. The gap between who you actually are and who you're performing, that's where the friction and stress lives. For me, that gap was massive. Publicly, I was trying to look like I had it all together. Privately, I was drowning. I didn't even know what I stood for. And that mohawk you saw, I really wore that as a shield. Who was I when nobody was watching? Well, I usually just sat around in my boxers, ate cereal, and watched conspiracy theory documentaries. There's a painted picture for you. And who was I pretending to be? Well, I had that. It was a dual mohawk, right? Nobody else had that. I've still never seen anybody with a dual mohawk. And it was pretty outrageous. I later recognized that I was using that as an armor to protect myself and keep people at bay. I remember when I was first meeting my wife's parents back then. She was my girlfriend. I showed up with that V-Hawk. My hair was dyed. It was that that Burning Man kid. And her sweet old father was talking to me, and I remember telling him, I said, if you can't get past this, then you don't get none of this. Telling him, like, you got to accept me the way that I look. Pretty hilarious. But inside, I was scared and completely unequipped for the world. And the gap between those two versions was massive. And I wasn't even aware of the gap at the time. So examining this stuff is uncomfortable work. I know, because I've done it. I've done Derek's assessment probably about 4 times in the last 10 years. But you know what's even more uncomfortable than that? Living your whole life as somebody that you're not. Following rules you don't understand or didn't choose, and wondering why nothing feels right. So after going through Derek's process, here's where I landed on my principles. The golden rule: treat others how I want to be treated. At the core of that, don't steal from them. Don't steal their opportunities. Don't steal their hats. That'll make sense in an upcoming interview. You'll find out soon about that. But notice, not because a religious text told me to, because I've been on both sides. I know what it feels like to be treated like garbage, and I refuse to make others feel that way too. Self-ownership. We covered this last week. Every person has the right to live their life as they choose, so long as they're not harming others. Why? Because I watch too many people try to control my life based on their beliefs, and I'm not going to let that happen again, and I can't do that to others. The seventh generation principle. This one is pretty, big in scope. Consider how your actions will impact the world 7 generations from now. But I do that by always having a default mindset of how can I add value to this situation, to the relationship that I'm, talking to or in right at the moment, to the land that I'm on. Always looking to improve the situation. And why does that matter? Because I have a daughter. And I want her kids and their kids to inherit a world that's better than the one I got, not worse. So you see the difference? It's not because someone said so. It's because I thought about it, I examined my life, and I decided this is what matters to me. Once you actually know what you stand for and why, your goals essentially write themselves. When your life contradicts your lists, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable. Once you start writing those down, the universe is going to challenge you. You write down those shiny new principles, you feel very enlightened. Yes, I'm going to do this. This is my life. And then actual life happens. When you say, my stated value is self-ownership, everyone controls their own life. My actual behavior I had to examine was hanging out with people I didn't even like, going along with whatever they wanted just to try and fit in. That's not owning my life. It's the opposite. My stated value, of personal responsibility, taking full responsibility of my life. And then my actual behavior was eating garbage food because I deserved a treat. I really love cereal land. And I had to let that go. Then I would complain about, my health. The golden rule, treating others right. My actual behavior was saying yes to things I didn't want to do, then resenting people for wasting my time, then not doing it, and then having them mad at me. That list looked great, but the life was, something completely different. But here's the truth. What you do is what you actually believe. Everything else is just wishful thinking. Most people don't have a value problem. They have an alignment problem. But once I got clear on my principles, I had to evaluate every relationship in my life. Some friendships elevated me. They challenged me to be better. They supported my growth. Others, they kept me small. They wanted the old version of me, the one who just partied, wasted time, never asking hard questions. And I had to make a choice. Keep performing to fit in, or be myself and risk losing everybody. All 2,000 friends on my Facebook. It wasn't easy, especially when you're coming out of that dark period and like any connection seems really valuable. But here's what I learned. A relationship that requires you to shrink isn't a relationship worth keeping. So I started being brutally honest. Stop showing up to things that drain me. Stop pretending to be interested in conversations I didn't care about. Some people got it, most did not. The ones who didn't, they just fell away. And honestly, that created space for the people who actually fit. I went from my 2,000 friends on Facebook to literally like 5 friends that would actually, visit and stay in touch. But now I got my best friends right up the street, and they add massive value to my life. And I try to do the same. And life has gotten really, really sweet. But this just didn't happen by accident. It happened because I stopped tolerating misalignment. If you can't have enough energy for good relationships because you're surrounded by chaos inside and out, then examine who you're hanging out with. Most of the limitations keeping you stuck aren't even real. My biggest mental cages were, I'm not skilled enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm stuck in the restaurant industry. In reality, I just had to learn the right things. Poor people like me don't get to have amazing lives. Plenty of people have rough starts and build amazing lives. I'm now one of them. And going through the holistic self-assessment, I realized that I can reinvent myself. I can choose foundationally who I am, what I stand for, and that changes how I act. And then that changes my environment. And who do I need to ask permission to do that? Nobody. I didn't need a fancy degree, an impressive background, or the right connections. I just needed to decide the old version of me wasn't my final form. And that's where designing you 2.0 comes in. See, everything clicked. Instead of trying to fix the broken version of myself, I started designing just a new version of who I wanted to be. And I started just acting that way. And like I said, the universe is going to test you. And that's really where things change. If you can choose to react differently, if you can step up to the challenge, that's where you actually start forming into the 2.0 you. And for me, it became really exciting. It was tough, but got kind of addicting. Getting on that path of self-development, taking responsibility for my actions, feeling good because I'm in alignment with myself, my life, my behaviors. I got to choose who I wanted to become. I didn't get to be that, and it didn't always get to be that way, and it didn't happen right away, but I got to pick the direction that I wanted to head, and I just started taking baby steps. And as I grew, a partner grew with me. We both held each other accountable. I was able to let go of scarcity thinking. It took a long time. Still floats around here and there. And the need for external validation, that was a hard one too. Addiction to instant gratification, whew, still showing up in my life. And the fear of failure. And walking this path, I realized that this was a blueprint. And here's the wild part. Your brain can't even tell the difference between vividly imagining experiences and creating the real ones. Your brain just starts to think that way. And the more I thought about my future how they handled stress, make decisions, spend their lives, the more I became that version. The alignment becomes your new normal. I had multiple selves that would show up in multiple different scenarios, and I was able to start aligning those into who I am today. I act pretty much the same way. My humor might adjust a little bit depending upon my social scene, but my character does not change. And once I started living in alignment with my actual principles, everything got simple. Decisions became easy because I had a clear filter. Does this align with me? No. Or yes. Relationships improved because I stopped tolerating chaos and I was there for those who needed me, who deserved it. My business grew because I was operating from authenticity instead of performance, and I wasn't just dropping balls and missing appointments as I used to. My family life started to thrive because I gave them my best energy, not just my leftovers. I'm not saying it was easy, but closing the gap, it required tough conversations, uncomfortable changes, letting go of people and habits that didn't serve me, and facing those root causes I've been avoiding for years. Still working on that. But on the other side, I have a life I can actually be proud of. So it's time to build your own operating system. Here's what I want you to understand. This isn't a one-time fix. This isn't a weekend project. The holistic self-assessment, go through it, and next year, check back in. Are those values still what you want to prioritize? Did you pick up any new principles you might want to live by? You'll discover new layers, and each time you'll see how much you've grown. Your life changes when your days change. Your days change when your habits change. Your habits change when your identities change. You got everything you need to do this work. So stop performing, stop living on borrowed beliefs, stop waiting for permission, and build your own operating system. Reinvent yourself. Your future self, the one who's actually living in alignment instead of pretending, will thank you.